Okay. All right, I'm just going live. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm really delighted to have Sally Kleyn of the company coach with me today. I've known Sally for about 15 years. And oh, I'm hearing feedback. So hold on for a second. Oops. So here we are again. So I'm with Sally Kleyn of the company coach. I've known Sally for about 15 years. We've worked together as coaches. She's a phenomenal coach, and I've loved working with her. And she's worked with some really powerful women. And I'm really going to inquire into her thinking today about how what her experience has been, both in herself, in terms of a woman working in the world, and also how she has coached other women and the journey that they've made. So welcome, Sally.
Thank you. Good morning, Penny. Hello, everybody.
So Sally, I'd love to perhaps have you introduce yourself and give everyone a bit of some background about who you are. And you're an American, and here you are, and I know you've lived in England for at least 30 years to my knowledge. So yes. tell us about your journey and what has meant that you've gone from America to here, and give us some background.
Okay, it's kind of always interesting, isn't it, when someone asks you to give your background. I won't tell you how old I am, but I have a lot of background that I could give. Yeah, I started in the United States. I was involved in psychology and psychological counseling, and that's how I started my career in a settlement house in New York City, helping people from a multi-ethnic, low-income background get jobs in the private sector. And then I was married to a guy who was in the theater, so we moved to Arizona for his career. And there I changed and went into corporate sales, which was a really interesting shift. And then again had to move because of his career to Wisconsin. And eventually he and I parted ways, and I stayed in Wisconsin. And I was on a plane going to a conference, and I happened to sit next to a very charming Englishman. And a couple of years later, I found myself living over here and married to him. So that's how I got here. And I remember thinking, you know, coming to a new country, it's an opportunity to kind of, I don't want to say reinvent myself, but to think about what I wanted to do. And although I had left counseling, it was always in my heart and in my blood. And I wanted to do something that would bring the psychology and the corporate sales experience into one package. And training and development and coaching and facilitation seemed like a good thing to do. I went back to the University of Surrey, got another master's degree in change agent skills and strategies. So we were looking at how do you get change at individual, group, and corporate level, or group organization level. Met some wonderful, wonderful people, and I've been in that field ever since.
Very good. Yeah, which is when just after that we met.
That's right. Yeah.
Excellent. So I know that you worked at high levels within organizations, and I wanted to ask you perhaps how did your counseling and psychology background really come into the work that you were doing with others? Because coaching, you know, as a dynamic, it can be very kind of sort of sterile in terms of, not sterile, but in terms of, you know, very business oriented and very organizational focused. So how did you find psychology and counselling come into what you were doing?
You know, it's not easy to answer that question. I think the reason it's not easy is because it's in my blood. You know, it's the lens through which I see the world, or
Yeah.
one of the key lenses through which I see the world. So I think one of the nice things, you know, it's interesting. Often those of us who do have psychology backgrounds in social situations, we don't tell anybody, because the first thing that happens is people immediately think, oh, you've been psychoanalyzing me all this time and you probably got me all figured out. And, you know, nothing could be further from the truth. So it's not something that I wear as a badge when I'm coaching, because I don't want all that baggage that goes with it.
Sure.
It's been nothing but a boost to me, and I hope, you know, a value to my clients, because, you know, what is psychology? It's just a real interest in what makes people tick. And further than that, my training has taken me into human systems. So I'm thinking about, how do people operate in systems, and what are the influences that particularly the organizational system, the culture have on individual behavior. And, you know, that can only be a boost when we're operating in a society that puts so much focus on the individual. And I think that does everyone a disservice, and sometimes makes it easy for organizations to blame the individual or stuff the individual with everything that's going on in the organization. And when they can't cope, giving them coaching when perhaps a much bigger and more serious intervention is required.
Yeah, at an organizational system level.
Quite, yes.
Yeah, right. Well, I suppose one of the things that we're here to talk about is the woman in society, which is a whole other system that you and I have been brought up in. And, you know, Standing in Her Power cause that I've kind of set up is really trying to help women, in some respects, create a new system in which they can operate, which, you know, is a very hard thing. Because, you know, when a system has been operative for, I don't know, to my knowledge, at least 10,000 years, when, you know, men have been the dominant sort of gender that has created all of the systems that we're actually operating in today, women have been, you know, tagged along, you know, have been tagging along. So how do you think about women in the system of today?
Well, Penny, you certainly like to ask good questions. That's a big question. That's a really big question. And I mean, yeah, when it struck me, 10,000 years of programming about who's in charge and how things ought to be, and setting the norms for success and the behavior that it takes to become successful, becomes so ingrained that it actually, I've been reading some stuff about this. It actually changes our DNA, it changes our makeup. And so some of the things that we think are inherent in our capabilities are not at all. But, you know, our brain chemistry has been changed, our molecular structure has been changed to fit the norms that we're born into, generation after generation after generation. So I think it's really, I applaud all the academics and all the researchers and the social anthropologists and the people who are out there pioneering for a different and better way, because my goodness, you know, we're up against, you know, we're climbing quite a steep mountain.
Yeah. Well, both you and I, you know, have spoken in the past about, you know, as women, you know, in our own lifetimes, we have made some major changes, but that doesn't change fundamentally the the system in which we're operating, and we're still sort of fighting the system in ourselves, you know. So
Yes,
we
yes.
talk about the kind of unconscious programming that we as women have, that we're also fighting against. So it's not all out there, and it's not just in men, and it's not just in the system, it's actually in ourselves. So perhaps let's go from the big picture to the from the macrocosm to the microcosm. Do you have any stories of your own experience, of your own life, where you've suddenly seen the system and you kind of collide and actually see that actually this is what the programming and the culture is all about, and this is not what I'm thinking at all?
Yeah, I do. You know, it is really interesting. I'm an only child. I was born to older parents. And, you know, they were quite established in their lives by the time I came along. But my mom stopped working when I was born. And I wouldn't have said that I was in any way hindered or that my choices were anyway influenced around gender. But of course, they would be coming from parents of, you know, an older generation, even older than my peers. And it came to fruition, or it came to mind one time when I was in graduate school in New York City, and I just got my master's in counseling. And that was during a period of economic downturn, and jobs in the social services and the counseling environment were very, very hard to come by. And I got a really good job, the director of an employment program. And I was terrified and excited at the same time. And I remember going back to visit my parents, and I was telling my dad about this great new job I got. And the very first thing he said to me was, "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. Now, John," you know, was my husband at that time, "now he'll be free to pursue his career." And that was just such a shocking thing, that would be the very, very first thing he said to me. And it just came flooding into me, all the programming that I must have absorbed about what men ought to do, what women ought to do. And, you know, very obviously in his mind, the man ought to be the breadwinner. And, you know, the only way I could be proud and happy about my success was the extent to which I was supporting my husband. And it was shocking. It was really, really shocking. But interestingly, I never confronted him. That's all part of the part of the pattern.
Yeah. So you never confronted him. And how about, it sounded from the story, I'm going to be a bit of a coach here, sorry.
Go for it.
It sounded like when you were telling me about your story with your husband, and, you know, he went there and you went with him, and he went to Wisconsin and you went with him, and, you know, you were a little bit of a man follower.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So how do you, looking back on that now, you know, obviously we all have incredible unconscious programming, and it's like following the husband or following, you know, the breadwinner. It is part of the norm that you would do when we were younger. So looking back on it now, what do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's sad. You know, sometimes it makes me angry, and sometimes it makes me sad, and sometimes it makes me frustrated. But, you know, what's interesting, yeah, I was following the man, but I was the breadwinner because, you know, wow, he had a job in the arts. I won't say any more, but, you know, I was the one who was bringing home the cash.
Most of the money.
It was that way, you know, through the majority of our lives. And, you know, I didn't think, you know, here again, unconscious, I didn't think about it. I didn't resent it at that time. I was proud of what I was achieving. Sure. But I see, you know, I was really on upward trajectory in New York when I was working. And, I was just about, when I resigned from the organization that I was working for, my manager told me that she was about to put me forward for a very big role, directing a citywide program. And I just walked away from that. I mean, I did kind of think, oh, that's too bad.
I've done something similar. I know the feeling.
I just walked away and, followed the hubby to a new state. And how interesting, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it's like, and the thing is that we don't even, looking back, I mean, I had a similar scenario in my first marriage. I was earning far more than my husband, and yet, I stepped out of my career in order to do something that he wanted. And I look back on it and I think, what a fool to do that. And also, not only do you do that, but also you don't challenge him.
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
you don't ever have the conversation, say, well, why should I go there because you want to do it, because my career is more important, or my career is equally important, or whatever. It's like we never had that conversation. But I think hopefully younger women do have those conversations, and there is hopefully more opening to do that. Well, I would hope so.
I hope so too. I was thinking the same thing. I hope that women hearing this say the same thing as, why in the world did you do that? I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even think of doing that. I hope. And I've got some evidence of the people that I've coached that kind of unconscious following is happening less.
Right. Excellent. Good. That's what we want to hear. So I know you've worked with a lot of women in your career, as have I. I'd like to perhaps talk about now some of the main blocks that you've encountered when you're coaching with women. What are the things that kind of surface out of the experiences that they're having at work that cause you to realize, actually, this is part of the unconscious programming that you have to make conscious and you have to help a woman deal with?
Yeah, I've identified a few big ones. I'll talk about the most obvious one first, and I know that you have written about this, and it's now a kind of recognized syndrome, the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So I remember walking through a prestigious office that had a beautiful foyer and a mammoth artist installation in the foyer, high status organization. And this woman was a director. And as I was admiring the art, she said, yes, I sometimes walk around here and think, what am I doing here? How did they let me in? Right. And I thought, oh my goodness, So a lot's been said about that and written about that. And I must say, I've coached men who have exactly the same thoughts and feelings, but it is prevalent in women. And therefore, I think because of that, I will often hear women, when they do want to make a change, they will think about, well, I need to go back and get some more education or qualification, something that's going to give me the badge of honor that I deserve to go for this new area. Whereas men, they'll just give it a go and see what happens. And so again, I hope there's some changes there. But I think the other interesting thing is women who are nice, really, really nice and cooperative and helpful and generous and unselfish in their work lives. and not getting the recognition, and not getting the benefits and the valuing of those wonderful qualities. Because my goodness, if there's one thing we need in the world right now, it's cooperation, collaboration, the willingness to think of others first, or at least equal with ourselves.
Yeah.
But these are not often recognized in the corporate environment. In fact, they are used as leverage against these women. And what I've now this is a real psychology issue, because what I find with every single woman I've met who's too nice, you just have to scratch the surface and you get a huge layer of anger and resentment. I mean, rage in some cases.
I was going to say rage is often something I've actually encountered.
Yes, yes. And yet it's, people who wouldn't have any insight around this wouldn't have a clue that happens. And that's often why these women, when they get frustrated and they can't contain it anymore within themselves, it'll come out in tears. And that again reinforces this idea that, women are emotional and all that sort of thing. And men very often are shocked when I tell them, if you've got women that you're working with and they're crying, that means they're pretty hacked off at you, at the system, at what's going on. And they're often completely shocked to hear that there's anger under our dear little
nice person.
Nice person.
Yeah.
So that is a tough one, because these women are afraid of their own anger. They're scared of what will happen when they, unleash, pop the cork, and they think everything's going to explode.
Yeah.
But of course, that's not true. It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
What happens is that the fury of that and the intensity of that emotion that should be directed outwards, not in violence, but in some kind of a constructive way, it doesn't. It goes back inside, and the person feels low, depressed, demotivated, wondering whether they can do it, whether they ought to do it, whether they ought to just leave and forget the whole thing. And so I think one of the most satisfying things that I do in my work is helping women get in touch with that anger, and help to use it as a way to recognize when their values are really being challenged, and when they want to make the stand. Not fighting every battle, but there are some battles that need to be fought. And they've got the energy, they've got the capability. They just, haven't had the experience to get to know their anger and realize it can be a friend. It can really be a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to talk about how you help people, overcome the imposter syndrome, how you overcome the nice and cooperative, so let's do that in the next stage, because I know that there's, is there another block that you've encountered?
Well, I guess the other one, of course, do you consider it a block? I mean, I'm full of admiration for the women who are managing high-powered careers and managing a family as well. I think the pandemic has really brought home the fact that a great deal of burden is placed on women. Who, of course, schools are now open, but they haven't been. And so the homeschooling, managing all the work responsibilities, keeping the home going is falling quite a bit onto the mother's shoulders. And that is a big challenge because, they're just tired. And we know how difficult it is to function when you're absolutely exhausted and have no room to think or to rest or to restore. It's a problem, big problem.
One of the blocks that, I think we've spoken about is the kind of reticence to step up.
Yeah.
And to shine, because I think that's a definite block, that I've encountered, that actually it's like, oh, I'm only a senior associate and I'm not sure that I should go to partner. And it's like, I'm coaching men and it's like, I'm going for partner. And there isn't a doubt, there isn't hesitation, whereas women are always concerned about, have I got everything? But it's not necessarily about the imposter syndrome. It's just the reticence to step up and step out because they think it's going to be too much hard work, or it's going to require stuff from them that they haven't got. They're that kind of just reticence to be quiet and to not be seen. That seems to be a different thing that's happening there.
Yes, that I recognize all of that, kind of waiting to be noticed.
Yeah.
And then when noticed, having all these doubts. I think men have these doubts when they step up too, but they overcome them more quickly. And, again, some of those concerns are valid because the women are stepping up into a climate and environment that doesn't, their style of leadership may not be on the radar screen, although, oftentimes their qualities have been noticed and they have been encouraged to step up and forward. So I think the work with women who are willing to make the step and to confront their doubts, that work is just, reality checking. The difference between going into the future, predicting a negative outcome, and then responding as though that outcome was happening here and now. So the palpitations, the sweaty palms, the doubtful thoughts, the lack of confidence, and the tendency to want to flee, are happening when, what's happening right now? What's happening right now? And that is a matter of, reprogramming and constantly kind of standing guard at the door of your consciousness, the door of your mind, and realizing, does this thought serve me or does it not serve me? And realizing that we are not our thoughts, we're not our feelings, we're bigger than all of that. There is within us that spark that just needs to be, flame that needs to be fueled. And it's not easy, but, very often after a period of people really being much more vigilant and disciplined with themselves about their thoughts and not letting them run rampant, they're kind of amazed that there is this reservoir of strength and desire and determination and belief, real belief that they've got something that they want to contribute. And that is a joy, absolute joy.
Yeah, fantastic. I think I call it mind management. Because it's like, becoming vigilant or becoming a kind of self-aware of the thoughts that are running through your head, and actually recognizing that because you think something, it's not necessarily true. You do not think, or you do not always think what is true. You think lies. And actually you have to be vigilant in your words as to, actually, is this thought true or is it a lie? And why am I processing lies in my head? And actually it does take some time, though, to kind of become more conscious of the thoughts that are passing through your head, and actually to practice the mind management that says, I'm not having that thought, get out.
Yes.
And that does take quite a lot of discipline, and does take quite a lot of time over a period of time to kind of manage one's thinking and to sort of allow what comes through. So this is fascinating. Thank you very much. That's I can see we're on the same track. We haven't worked together in a long time, but actually I can see that we've developed our thinking in similar lines. So I know a lot of women that that may be watching this video have come across the imposter syndrome and feel it in themselves and recognize it. And LinkedIn recently has had quite a few people commenting about the experiences with imposter syndrome. I'd really like to ask you, what is your approach when you encounter that as a major issue in a woman? What do you take the woman through in terms of the thinking and in terms of the dealing with this kind of quite pervasive thought patterning?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there when you said pervasive, because I think about this as almost like an octopus, with many, many different tentacles wrapped around different systems, emotional systems, thinking systems, even our hardwiring, our central nervous system. Everything gets affected by this, this belief that we're not really who we portray ourselves to be. And none of us are, there are, I'm sitting here calmly, nicely dressed, this is not the way I am all the time. Yesterday I might have been a raving, someone or another. So that's the one thing. But reality testing. Look at the facts. But most of the time, so self-awareness, that's the first thing. And to start to become much more aware when this pattern comes, and to challenge it, because the problem is it hasn't been challenged for however many years you've been alive and conscious, aware of yourself and your relationship with others and comparing yourself to others, which starts at a very, very, very young age. That doubting has never been challenged. So the voice, it's strong. It's really, really strong. And I think I have had the most success with helping people to isolate and identify the part of themselves that's creating this, because it is created. It has been created as a solution to a problem in the past. Right. Might have been in your family, and you learn that one of the ways you can keep peace in your family is by stepping back, not pushing your views, not putting too much pressure. As little ones, we are very clever at knowing how to keep our systems, our family systems going. And we take all the blame upon ourselves. Yes. And, people know that. So this was a part of ourselves that developed at a time in a context when it may have been appropriate. It may have been necessary. It probably wasn't the best way, or maybe the only way, but within the resources that, that child has, it is the only thing they can do, and they do it. And so this part has a protective nature about it. So the problem with it becomes like a closed system, and a closed system doesn't take in feedback. Right. So the fact that the syndrome at one time served a purpose, and now 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, it's a burden, and it's not helping anymore. It's a liability. That part doesn't know it. It just has an on switch and an off switch. And it's very sensitive to anything that might be a threat, and it turns itself on very, very easily and quickly, instantaneously, threat on, like that. So getting to know the part and kind of finding ways, and we do that in many different ways, physically, emotionally, through visualization, through many different ways of accessing, finding a way to get that part to talk to us about what it's doing in our lives, and then working with other parts that haven't been able to get as much airtime in our thinking. That's the strong, the courageous, the part that wants to go forward and believe in ourselves, gets stronger and starts to have more prominence in our internal system. And you know, again, it's I think for many people it's a lifelong work.
Yeah, yeah, a struggle, isn't it, really? But it comes out of that, you know, very early programming, isn't it? And it comes out of the family system, as you've identified. So I was going to ask you, going back to, you know, the recent experience of women in the lockdown, and the fact that however much, and I coach men and I coach women, however much men talk about, well, in the lockdown, I was pulling my weight and I was doing lunches and dinners and everything, there's still the experience of most women that actually the burden of the of the children in the family and the burden of caretaking the family has fallen on women during the lockdown. And I see that to be still a function of the system of men and women in the world today. Well, say not in the world, in the UK today. I have to say that because I know that every country is very, very different. Even today, you know, there's cultures that are very, very backward thinking about women. But, you know, in the UK today, the women still have borne more of the brunt of the caretaking and of the children schooling and everything. So that does tell me that we haven't changed a lot.
No,
no,
we haven't. You know, so there's, yeah, it just kind of falls to women. And I don't, you know, I think we are making progress because at least we're talking about it. It's more conscious now, even though there aren't so many solutions, but at least, you know, it's a subject on the table. But I haven't seen many, you know, many situations where different solutions have been able to be sustained.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, what is the solution? Because is it a factor of women having a different kind of conversation with their husband? Is it an external circumstance that needs to be changed, or is it the internal dynamics of the husband and the wife versus the children that needs to adjust?
I think it has to be all of those. Because it resides everywhere. But you know, I think, you know, if there can be one small victory, if women will see this as a cultural, something that's cultural, and the fact that they find it impossible to do all these things is in no way an indication of their lack of capability. Quite the opposite. I am in awe of the women that I've coached who keep these things together. I think they're paying a huge price, not only in terms of their mental health, because we're all talking about that, but their physical health as well. So I think, again, you know, it's just so easy to blame the individual and to think that the responsibility for that lies completely and exclusively on her doorstep, and it just doesn't.
Yeah, very interesting. So that's fascinating conversation, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you also, if I let me see, did you have children? Let me ask you that question.
No, I didn't.
See, it's interesting, I didn't have children either.
Mm.
And I wonder whether that there's going to be, as part of women's liberation or women's freedom, is the choice not to have children, not to engage in the sort of dynamics that, in some respects, I mean, I was brought up in a very large family, and I was, you know, I was like the substitute mom because I was the eldest in the family, and I did enough mothering for my brothers and sisters, and I thought, well, I'm not doing that again. So I wonder whether that creates a different dynamic. The fact that you don't have children, you do have more independence, you do have more freedoms, and children, you know, are a little bit of a burden in terms of the caretaking that you have to organize for, even if you're not going to do it yourself. As a woman, you're the one that thinks about the sort of the caretaking side of children and their growth and their development and things of that kind.
Yeah, I mean, that one is a little bit harder for me because I wanted children.
Right.
I didn't always want children.
Right.
By the time I realized I did want them, it was harder. You know, I was older, and it was harder, and it just didn't happen.
Right.
I mean, fortunately, my current husband, had a daughter from a previous marriage. Right. And so I've had the joy of being what they call a bonus mama. And now nice. I'm a bonus grandma. And I love it. And I feel so pleased about that. But yes, I mean, I acknowledge that, you know, it's been easier, you know, to navigate career, to move countries, to move within countries, to work long hours, and you know, to have somebody else, you know, there to do some cooking and that sort of thing. And yes, I do have to admit that there are some advantages, but I still would have rather it had been different.
Yes,
but
right.
You know, I accept that that's the way it is, and I was determined not to be. Well, I was sad about it, of course, but not let it ruin my life or make me feel in some way unfulfilled.
Right, very good. So I have another kind of almost a systems question.
Okay.
I'm kind of interested in the trends of the world, as well as, you know, the kind of women trends at a local level, but at the bigger trends. If I ask you, this is quite a subtle thing I have to sort of connect to. Do you see the world of work changing? Because if men have created the world that we mostly inhabit today, they've created the concept of the big corporates. They've created the concept of, you know, the global domination, the kind of the big ideas that often create power, that enable men to feel fantastic and then they're doing great things in the world. But that's not necessarily what I think the kind of wiring of the innate nature of a woman is about. And that, you know, I sometimes envisage a situation, what if women were to change the world and we would create a world where we had a system or had systems that were much more natural, natural to women, natural to the planet, where we would not be, you know, extracting the wealth of the planet and consuming it in the way that our big corporate structures have done with impunity, really, over the last several hundred years. And I think that women would want a more caring, more smaller, focused world, whereby we would be much more caring about the environment, caring about the planet, caring about, you know, what impact our, you know, manufacturing would have upon people and systems. And I wonder what thoughts you've had around that. You know, what kind of system would women create in the world that could be different to what exists today?
Well, I think if women ruled the world, it would be different. It would be different. And in my humble opinion, better. In many ways, things are changing. I mean, we do see women in positions of power in the corporate world, in the political world, in the scientific world. But it's, you know, it's still unusual enough that it often gets pointed out. The first woman this, the first woman that, and you think, my goodness, you know, it's taken a long time. And in terms of the way that we have been consuming and, you know, abusing our planet, I don't know that we've got time to really see this experiment through. Whether, you know, I think, how long would it take to really start seeing a feminine energy, a feminine sensitivity really impacting the decisions of the world? I don't know. I think better brains than I are tackling that situation. And of course we still have, so we talk about inequalities and women, you know, women of color are finding it very, 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 very difficult to get into the positions of power that they want and that they deserve. So
yeah,
I think we've got a long way to go. That doesn't mean we should stop trying, and that doesn't mean that we should in any way silence our voices, and, you know, find courage to bring a different energy, a different sensibility, a different value set into the environments in which we operate. And it benefits everyone. It benefits everyone.
It should do. I mean, it's interesting. There's a very high-powered woman who is one of the sort of senior marketing directors of, you know, the likes of, well, I won't say what, but something in the order of magnitude of, you know, LinkedIn and, you know, TikTok and, you know, various areas like that I've spoken with. And her worry was, you know, there is such an emphasis from the top about growth. And it's like they can't see that actually growing a business that's technology that is constantly using up, you know, the energies of people to market and to sell, you know, it's like, hang on a minute, have we got this wrong? You know, and women need, and she sees it's wrong. She recognizes, hang on a minute, growth should not be the only factor. And yet, you know, she's always measured by how much she's grown the marketing, how much she's sold this quarter. And it's like this constant pressure. Now, I only perceive that to be part of the sort of the male sort of psychology that says growth is good.
Yes.
And somewhere, why don't we think that static is good? Why don't we think that getting smaller is good? You know, surely if we are consuming the wealth of the planet and consuming the well-being of the planet faster and faster because everything is growing, why can't we see that actually making businesses smaller would be success?
Yes.
So it's like, you know, we need to kind of rewrite the ideas of what success looks like, both at a personal level, at a relationship level, but also at a business level and a the concept level. So I don't know if you would have any thoughts on those ideas.
Well, I wholeheartely agree that the growth mindset is just so ingrained that it's the assessment against which everyone is measured in not just in business, but in the charity sector and in the all sectors. So yeah, I mean, and there are wonderful, refreshing ideas. The circular economy is becoming more and more known as a concept, as idea. It's being experimented with and tried. And it just, when I hear these things, I think, oh, there's just something that resonates that says there are different ways. There are different ways. And, because of the looming crisis, or the crisis that's already upon us, eyes are being opened. Our eyes are being opened to say, we don't have decades. We don't have decades to sort this out. Let's do it now.
Yeah. And I think this is where women can hopefully feel a bit more confident to kind of bring out a little bit more creativity and actually to be a bit quite radical. I sort of feel like we need radical solutions to our own individual situations, but also into our work situations, into our cultural situations, and into our society larger. So
yeah, and I still wonder about the ways in which children are being pushed along gender lines, and again, unconsciously, girls moving away from math, sciences into other, girly type things. And so, yeah.
Just not going to change the world quite yet, but we're trying.
Just keep keeping on and chipping away at every single level and layer of this, and thinking about where are the areas where we can have some influence on this. Because when I think that the mood is right in the world, receptivity to different ways of thinking, this might be a golden time where new solutions are just so obviously required that, and the alternative is unthinkable, that maybe this is the moment, this is the time.
Yeah, and I think, women have an incredible amount to contribute in terms of creativity and innovative solutions to these issues, because we are experiencing the world slightly differently to how men are experiencing it. And it's like, hopefully, need is the mother of invention. And we have great needs, I think, in our society today to make those different. So, Sally, we've had a fascinating conversation. Thank you very, very much for your insights and bringing your experiences. I suppose one last question is, like, if there was one piece of advice that you would want to give women from the wealth of your experience, what would you say?
This is going to sound very trite. Love yourself.
Okay, say more.
Well, you are not going to bring your creativity, your gifts out if you don't have an internal way of validating yourself, because you may not get the validation externally. So the more you can, get away from these airbrushed images and expectations, and really think, I am a person of worth because I am here, because I exist. So what have I got to say? What's my authentic way of being in the world, where I can really live my values? And if I'm living my values, I'll be influencing. And if I want to step onto a bigger stage, why not? Why not? I can do it.
Thank you very, very much. That's brilliant. That's a wonderful note, and very, very, very valuable piece of advice to give every woman. It's one I have to keep reminding myself about.
Yes, yes.
Because you know, there's not enough love in the world, and we need to start with ourselves, and then we can give out to others. So thank you very, very much, Sally.
You're very welcome.
And thank you everyone who's watched this. If you have any questions or comments, you know, Sally and I will be, you know, engaging in this conversation after this. So thank you very much, and bye-bye for now.
Thanks, Penny. Bye, everyone.
Bye.